Hi guys! I think you all heard about the legendary Titanic. It's been over 100 years since it sank in the bottom of the Atlantic, never finishing its first ever cruise. But did you know all the weird stuff that's been going on during its construction and throughout the trip? I suggest you guys spend a few minutes to learn some truly fascinating facts about the Great Titanic. In the year 1909, a huge iceberg split off the Greenland glacier. It had a length of about 1 kilometer and weight of 2.5 million tons. At the same time, the construction of the world's biggest ship of that period began. It was 269 meters in length, 28 meters wide, and 18.5 meters high, measuring from the waterline to the deck. It had a weight of more than 64 tons and the maximum speed of 24 to 25 knots. It wasn't exactly the modest creators who decided to give it the name of the word Titan. At the moment in human history, it was the biggest moving object in the world. If put vertically, it would seem almost 2 times higher than the Pyramid of Cheops, and horizontally it was about the size of a 20-story building. Titanic had 4 pipes, but only 3 of those were functional. The 4th one was an element of design. This is the place where Titanic was born. The pit was dug especially for construction purposes. Meanwhile, the iceberg was caught by the stream and swam in the unknown direction. It took 3 years to finish Titanic. 15,000 people were working on it tirelessly. 4 million pounds, which is about $7.5 million, were spent on this massive ship. In the modern economic climate, that would be about $166 million. It's funny that $200 million were spent on James Cameron's sequel, Titanic. The first class ticket cost $4,350, an equivalent of today's $100,000, which was absolutely huge amount for that time. On the 12th of April at 12 o'clock, Titanic took off the Southampton pier and barely avoided a clash with American liner New York. Not many people know that before the departure, an event occurred that played an important role during the crash. Just a few days before the trip, a fire emerged in one of the fuel depots. The captain decided to deal with the problem on his own, as the reputation of the biggest and the most luxurious ship in history was on the line. For a few days, the crew fought with the fire, and when the ship has arrived to port, it was moored in a way that the passengers wouldn't notice the soot and the charred paint. The traces of soot can be seen in many photographs, but at that time nobody paid attention as the fire broke as the vessel was functional and seemed insubmersible. Because of the fire, the temperature inside the compartment has reached 1000 degrees Celsius. The board side metal lost resiliency and become brittle. If there wasn't a fire, Titanic might have survived the clash, but unfortunately the hit went right into the weakened spot. But before the accident, there were many other warning signs which indicated that this journey wasn't supposed to happen. There wasn't any ceremonial ship launching, as the owners were not superstitious. Usually, a bottle of champagne is crushed on board of the brand new ship. There were 2,224 people on board of the ship, but the total capacity of the lifeboats was intended for 1,178 people only. According to the olden days rules, the total capacity of the lifeboats depended on the tonnage of the vessel, not the number of people on the board. The rules were made back in 1894, when the largest of vessels had displacement of about 10,000 tons. Titanic displacement was 5 times greater. On the 14th of April, safety trainings were supposed to take place, but due to the unknown reasons, the captain cancelled it. It is assumed that if it had happened, more people could have been saved. At the moment of the departure, the distance between the iceberg and the ship was about 3.5 thousand kilometers. Titanic was often called a floating palace. Instead of being at the back, the first-class cabins in the main area were in the middle of the vessel, which helped to protect the VIP passengers from the noise and pitching. First-class cabins had water pipes and steam heating. Stewards could be summoned by pressing the electric bell. There were massive windows instead of the usual portholes. Some cabins even had fireplaces. The furniture was designed by the best artists and craftspeople. Only the best restaurants, exclusive dishes, celebrity chips. There was about 10 tons of meat, a ton of freshly caught fish, 35,000 eggs, 3 tons of tomatoes, 40 tons of potatoes, 5 tons of sugar, and a lot more. A White Star Line shipping company did its best. There was a tennis court, a swimming pool, all kinds of saunas, winter garden, a roller skate ring, golfing area, gym, parking space, a hospital with an operating room, information desk, post office, library, barber shop, smoking lounges, and even a sand playground for kids. There was a special area for passengers' pets and especially adapted areas for valets and maids. Titanic was famously called a Millionaire's Express. During the voyage, Titanic became a meeting place for many oil tycoons, coal barons, and other high society figures. The vessel had 16 watertight compartments, which in case of depressurization were blocked in 25 seconds. It was constructed in a way that allowed it to stay afloat in case of flooding of any of the 4 different compartments. Researchers believe that at least 6 compartments were damaged, which further led to the wreckage of the vessel. Nobody used binoculars as the safe key was gone. The second officer, Blair, took it when the captain replaced him with the member of the Olympic team. 3 days after Titanic was gone, Blair found the key in his pocket, but it was too late. It is possible that the lack of binoculars were one of the reasons for the crash. After 95 years, the key was sold at auction at the price of $180,000. Since the moment the iceberg was detected, the crew had only 37 seconds to avoid the catastrophe. First Officer Murdoch ordered to turn left and set the full reverse, but it didn't help. The managing director of the White Star Line company, Joseph Bruce Ismay, has ordered to reduce the amount of lifeboats from 48 to 16 for convenience. As a matter of fact, 16 was the minimum amount for Titanic. Also, Ismay insisted that the maximum speed was set to maximum, and that is also believed to be the reason for the tragedy. Fearing that lifeboats might not be able to withstand a large amount of passengers, at first they were loaded less than for a half, which is 20 people per boat max, although they were capable of bearing at least 70 men each. After a note from the chief engineer, boats were filled entirely. There were also folding boats that some of the officers used. The analysis showed that if the crew acted according to plan, they could have saved at least 553 more people. So it seemed like on the 14th of April at 2340 an invisible line was drawn under all the accidents, coincidences, and mystics. Was it ever possible to avoid this horrible tragedy? If David Blair hadn't forgotten to hand the keys from the locker, maybe then the lookouts would have spotted the iceberg 3 kilometers ahead. If the iceberg had not overturned shortly before, perhaps it could have been seen even with the bare eye at least 1 kilometer ahead. If the moon was shining that night, the lookouts could have spotted the iceberg 20 seconds earlier, and that would have been enough to avoid the fatal clash. And if after the fire-damaged metal had been replaced, it's possible Titanic could have stood the hit. When Titanic was sinking, standard distress signals were sent, but nobody answered those until it was too late. Not many people know that the captain of Californian steamship could come to rescue. It was only 13 kilometers away, but the crew did not respond to the weird lights in the sky that were launched from Titanic. One of the members of the crew tried to wake the captain, but the former only said that the radio man is off duty and asleep. Another ship, called Samson, was even closer to Titanic, only 12 kilometers away, although people say that it wouldn't respond anyway, as they were engaged in illegal fishing. Both of those vessels were closer than Carpathia, which later saved the survivors from Titanic. 14 years before the tragedy, the novelist Morgan Robertson wrote Futility, The Wreck of the Titan, which is a book that tells a story of a similar catastrophe. The story features the fictional ocean liner Titan, which sinks in the Northern Atlantic after striking an iceberg. It was published in 1912, not long before Titanic sank. A so-called conspiracy theory appeared because of an uncanny resemblance of Titanic and a vessel called Olympic. Supporters of this theory suppose that these twin ships switched in order to cover the insurance cost after the incidents with the English vessel the Hawk. Although this theory is proven to be wrong, as the plate with 401 number on it was lifted from the ocean bottom. 401 is Titanic's construction number. Another theory is saying that Titanic didn't hit the iceberg. Some people are saying that it was hit by a German torpedo, that was launched by some company in order to get the insurance. Although it seems unrealistic considering the number of the company employees on the board of the ship. The third theory is a real piece of work. There are people who say that a Godzilla-like monster sunk the vessel. It's kind of odd because none of the passengers ever said anything even remotely similar to this statement. In April 2012, the remains of the ship acquired the protection of the UNESCO Convention of 2001 about the protection of the underwater cultural heritage. So now, state parties of the convention have the right to prevent the disposal or destruction of the objects found on the shipwreck sites. Thank you for your attention, guys. Hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Don't forget to share the video with your friends. See you in the next episode.